Welcome to this module of Professor Messer's free CompTIA A+ certification training course on command line troubleshooting. I'm James Messer, and this module will go through 22702, our practical application exam, and will be looking specifically at section 2.1, where we need to select appropriate commands and options to troubleshoot and resolve problems. And we've got a big list of commands to go through, everything from check this to edit to copy to xcopy to ipconfig and much more that we're going to do in this module. There are a lot of things that we can do at the command line of the operating system. We don't have to have a fancy graphical front end, but one of the things that makes this a challenge is that there's no things to click on. We don't have any pull-down windows. There's no radio buttons. We have to do everything by typing in at the keyboard. Fortunately, there's a few things that we can do at the command line that can give us some prompts on what we can do. For any of these commands, you can use the help command, use help and then the name of the command you would like to know more about, and it will give you usually information about that command. Another useful command to do is to use the command and then a /?, which is a flag that asks, what options do I have for running this command? And this is one, for instance, I did this with copy. I did a help copy. If you did a copy /?, you'd get the same thing that shows you all of the different options that you can use for the copy command. So if you're stuck at a point, you aren't quite certain exactly what the command line parameters were, what flags you should be putting in and things at the command that you're typing in, this can tell you. Use the /A to indicate an ASCII text file. Use the /N to use the short file name. Use /Y to suppress prompting to confirm that you want to overwrite a file. And that way you can now decide which ones you'd like to use for the command that you're typing in. It will really help you if you ever get stuck trying to figure out what to type in a command prompt. Included in this section for the command line options and troubleshooting was this particular command, which you can start at the command line, but it's really a graphical program called msconfig. It shows you the system configuration of your computer, everything from a general config to the things that start up in services and your startup folders, and all the way down to tools, which can also be a jumping off point to load other different troubleshooting tools and programs. Let's start up msconfig and I'll show you some of this. In Windows Vista here, and it works the same in Windows XP, I can type a CMD right here in my command line and it will put up a command line. So this is what we will be using to do a lot of these command line utilities. Now msconfig, as I mentioned, we can type in there and hit enter. It's going to really run the Windows executable, and the user account control even tells us that we're starting up a system configuration utility that can make things run during startup or remove things from startup. So that's kind of important. So it's saying, do you want to continue? Yes, we do. And now it launches the graphical msconfig system configuration. Now, a startup selection is here on the general tab where we can do a normal startup, a diagnostic startup, or a selective startup. Maybe you're trying to troubleshoot something that occurs during the startup process. Maybe while we're doing that, we only want to load system services, or maybe we don't want to load system services or startup items. So we can start doing some comparisons of where does the problem occur? Does the problem occur when we load system services? Does the problem occur when we load the startup items? You also have options on the boot view here. This changes your boot.ini file in Windows, so you have the options on doing a safe boot, or get rid of the GUI when you're booting, or show the boot information about the operating system. The part that I find really interesting is the Services tab and the Startup tab. If you're trying to pick individual programs to enable or disable during the startup process, this is exactly where you can do it. And you can see that Windows Defender and the VirtualBox Guest add-ons run because I'm running this Windows Vista in a virtual machine. And you can enable or disable these particular functions or services. And as you've also seen under the Tools menu, you also have a lot of things that you can choose from as here. If you want to just enable or disable all the user account control, you can do it from here. If you want to start the performance monitor, if you want to launch computer management, rather than going through all of those different menu options or settings to find those things, you can come right to the system configuration utility, click what you'd like, hit the launch button, and off it goes. If you believe that the files that are on your hard drive, that you're having some problems with the basic structure of your hard drive directory, maybe you'd like to run a check disk to see if there are any errors, any logical errors with the way that the files are named and stored in the directory of your file, of your hard drive. Now, what you can also do with check disk is use a /R at the end of that, and it will actually go down to the drive itself and look at every sector of the drive to see if there's any bad parts of the hard drive. And if it does find some, it marks them or marks them as unreadable and tries to recover information from them so that you can get the information out of those bad sectors. Checkdisk/F will actually fix errors on the disk if it finds any logical problems with the directory. So let's try one of those and see what we get. The checkdisk command is one of these commands you run at the command prompt that needs elevated privileges. So for example, if I go to my start and I do a CMD and hit enter, and I type checkdisk/F, or even just a plain checkdisk, we get a message that says, the access is denied as you do not have sufficient privileges. You have to invoke this utility running in elevated mode. So that's not going to work in this prompt. It's running right now just as a regular cmd.exe. So what I'd like to do is change it up a little bit. I'm going to type CMD here so that it still finds the program, but I'm going to right mouse click on CMD and run as administrator. Now I'm going to get the prompt that says, are you sure that you would like to do this? And I would like to continue. Let's click the continue button. And now here I am. I'm now at the command prompt.exe, but notice I'm now running as administrator. So now I should be able to use the checkdisk command, and I'm going to use the /F to check through the files. And now it will run, and it said, you cannot run because this volume is in use by another process. Would you like to schedule this volume to be checked the next time the system restarts? And you can say yes. And now when the system restarts the next time, it's going to be able to show us the check disk and run through all of the different settings, even though there was something else at the same time that was trying to make use of the drive. This way we're able to still accomplish the check, but now it's going to do it when the system starts up before anything else has an access to that drive. And that way we can be assured that we're able to check all the way through the file directories and run all the tests we'd like to without anything else interfering with us. Here's what this looks like when our Windows starts back up. It's going to bring up this bright blue screen and run through the check disk program. When it completes this, it then continues with the normal operating system startup program, and it will tell you if it needs to correct files, and it will stop and prompt you if anything needs to be changed. But this way you're able to at least get your check disk completed before anything else can access the drive. Now let's start working with some files at the command line. Normally we're using the Windows Explorer, and we can graphically see the drives, and we can see all of the folders and the nested folders and all of the files in a very graphical view. Well, when you're at the command line, you still have that level of control, but you have to type a few extra things in to be able to see things like the folders or the directories, to see the files, and to move and change some of the files. This first command we'll learn is the dir command, the directory command, which is going to list out for us all of the files that happen to be in the directory where we're residing. Let's try that out. One of the things you've probably noticed when we were at the command prompt is the prompt right here has C:\users\professor. That tells us that the current directory that we're in is our users directory folder, and inside of that, I'm in the professor folder. So when we look at this and do a directory, that command we were just shown, it will list out everything that is in this folder. And in this folder are a number of directories. They are nested directories within this. They have the dir command associated with them. There's some files here, obviously not a member of the directory. They're not a single directory. They're a file within this directory. dtcinstall.log, picture01.lnk, setupact.log, and you can see the different files in the number of bytes associated with those files. So simply doing a directory command will show you everything in here, and it's not as pretty as that Windows Explorer is, but we still have access to exactly the same information. When you're working in the Windows Explorer, it's very easy to add a new folder, to change where you're looking in which folder just by clicking on the folder name. You can see all of the files are in the folder. You can use the delete button to remove a folder if you'd like. At the command line, you'd have to use these commands. The MD command will make a directory. The CD command will change into that directory, and the RD command will remove a directory. Let's try that. On our command prompt, we have a lot of different directories here, but let's say we wanted to add a new directory. Maybe we would like to add one that would have some books that we would like to put in there. I'm going to MD to make a directory called books, and I'm going to hit enter, and it just gives me a prompt back. If I use that directory command again, you can see now at the top of my list is a directory called books. If I wanted to move my current view into that directory, I use the cd command and type books. And there I've now moved into users professor books. I could also have typed cd /users /professor /books, and it would have done exactly the same thing. But just by typing a space and then the name of the directory, it moves me into the next available directory that might be where I'm currently located. If I do a directory, you'll see I am in books. There's no files in here whatsoever. And now I am able to move files into here, copy files into here, start editing files. It's now a separate folder that I can do anything I'd like with it. What I'd like to do now is get rid of this directory. And I'm going to move now. I'm going to change directory back to my users professor folder. I'm going to use the tab key to auto-complete some of these. The tab key becomes very useful for us at the command line. Now I'm back to users professor. If I do a directory, you'll even see that's exactly where I started. Now I'd like to get rid of books, and let's do the rd command space and books, and it just comes back and does nothing. It tells me nothing happened, but in reality, it really did remove the books directory. If I do a dir command, you'll see books is now missing. So just by using the md command to make directory, the cd command to move, to change the directory, and the rd command to remove directory, we can start manipulating some of these folders that we have at the command line. In the Windows GUI, we have the Notepad program, we have word processing programs. It's a very graphical environment. But if we need to edit some files at the command line, we don't have that pretty graphical environment, but we still have a program called Edit that will allow us to do this full screen editing of files, but it's all character based. Let's give it a shot. In my folder, my users professor folder, I have a file called dtcinstall.log, and I'm going to use the edit command and DTC, and I'm going to use that tab key again to autocomplete so I don't have to type the whole thing, and I'm going to hit enter. And what starts up is this front end that is it looks very graphical, just like you'd have in Windows with a file pull down menu and edit, but notice it's all character based. Not quite the graphical environment, but it is full screen. I can move my cursor around the screen. I can select holding down the shift key, just like you do in Windows. I can hit the delete key to delete certain files. I can go all the way to the bottom and type new information. And I can save this file. I can even use the Alt keys. I can hold down the Alt key and notice that you have highlighted characters just like you do in Windows. I can hold down Alt F, and to save this, I hit the S button, and that saves the file. Or I could simply use my mouse to save the file as well, same way. And I can exit out of here with file exit just like you do in Windows. Makes it very easy to edit files when you're at a command line. If we wanted to take some of the files that we had somewhere else on the hard drive and copy them to another folder, we would use the copy command. The copy command has 3 command line flags, different options that might be available for us to use. The important ones from our CompTIA requirements document was copy/A, copy/V, and copy/Y. Copy/A comes in handy when you're trying to copy a file and have it stop at a special mark inside of the file that designates it as the end of the file. And in that case, we refer to those as these ASCII files as an end of file marker. If you want the copy command to take notice of that end of file marker, then you would use the /A to make sure it copied it as an ASCII file and it stopped copying it when it got to that end of file marker. We also have the /V file, which means once we copy the files over, I would like the copy command to check the file we copied and make sure that it is exactly the same as the file we started with. That way we know and have verified that those 2 files are completely identical. And lastly, we have this /Y command that suppresses a prompting that confirms if we want to overwrite a file. If you try to overwrite a file at the command prompt stops and says, whoa, you're about to overwrite a file. Is that okay? And then you have to specify yes if it is. With the /Y, it just copies it anyway. It doesn't ask you for any prompts. It just goes ahead and copies right over the file that might be there. So you have to be very careful about when you use that /Y. Only use it when you're absolutely sure you want to copy over a file. Let's try copying a file now. I'd like to take one of these files, the setupact.log file, and I'd like to copy it into my work folder. Let's use that copy command, and I'm just going to have it copy and maybe a V to verify the setupact.log. I'll hit the tab key to autocomplete, a space, and then the the name of the directory where I would like to copy this to. So what the syntax of the copy command is to copy the name of the file I'd like to copy and then the location where I'd like to copy it to. I'm going to hit enter and it copies the file. And because I use the /v, I know the file where I copied it is exactly where it should be. And if I do a directory now of the work directory, I now have that setup.act.log file right in there. Now let's try copying again. I'm going to use my up arrow twice to get back to that same command, and I'm going to run the same copy command again to go back to that file. And I'm going to hit enter, and this time it says, do you want to overwrite the file, yes or no? And you may decide, no, I don't want to overwrite the file. But what if we wanted to use the copy /y command to copy that setup.act.log file to work? Watch what happens this time. Just copies the file. Doesn't prompt you. You're hoping, I hope, that you really did want to copy that because there's no going back now. You've already copied the file. Unless you have a backup of the original, you've already duplicated and overwritten the file that was already there. The copy file is great, but what if you wanted to copy multiple files from the command line all with one fell swoop? You didn't want to have to copy individual files or groups of files. You wanted to specify maybe not just one folder, but many nested folders, copy them all at one time. That's exactly what we can do with the xcopy command. Back to our command prompt, you can see I have one of the directories on here called work. And if I do a directory of the work directory, you'll see that the work directory not only has a number of files in there, there's that setup.act log we just copied, there's also a folder, a directory within the work directory called backup. If I do a dir space work /backup, it will show me there's even 2 files in the backup directory as well. Let's say I want to take everything in that work folder and copy it to a new folder. I'm going to create a new directory called work2. And if I do a dir, you'll see now I have both a work and a work2 directory. And because I just created the work2 directory, there's nothing in there to see. I'm going to use the xcopy command with the /s parameter. That means that I want to copy also every subdirectory within what I'm about to copy. And I want to copy everything that's in work to work2. Let's see what happens. I'll hit enter. And now you can see it has started to copy and it's done 6 files. It copied everything in the work directory. And then it even went further because I used the /s into the work backup directory and copied those files as well. So it made it very, very simple for me. If I do a directory of work2 now, you see the work2 has the same files that work used to have. And if I do a directory of work2 /backup, you'll even see it copy that subdirectory too. The xcopy can really save you some time when you're trying to copy many files in many nested directories all in one single command line. If you recall, during the setup process for Windows, we were installing Windows 2000 and Windows XP and Windows Vista on one of our previous videos. You remember that we partitioned a section of the drive, and then Windows wanted to install or format the drive and just before the installation occurred. And the format said, do you want to format this with the NTFS file system or the FAT file system? Then it began the format process. That must occur whenever you have a brand new drive or a drive that's not formatted already. You must have the operating system format it with a drive format that can be recognized by the operating system. Then after it formats, you're able to store files on it and retrieve files and do all the things that we're doing right now. If you plug in a brand new USB drive, for instance, that has to be formatted. It has to have a file system on there the operating system can recognize. And at the command line, we use the format command to do this. You simply use the word format and a space and then the drive letter associated with the drive that you'd like to format. Be very careful with using this at the command line. You don't want to specify the wrong drive letter, especially when you have a lot of removable drives in a system, you're plugging in another USB key. This really doesn't tell you exactly what you're doing. It says that at the command line, it's really relying on you to know that if you want to format K:, that really it's K: that you want to format, because at that point it's off to the races and it begins formatting that drive. So this works fantastic. Just make sure that you're formatting the right drives and you've confirmed that what you're trying to format is exactly the right thing. You don't want to delete any files unnecessarily. The command line is also a great place to get information about how your system is configured. And the ipconfig program, that little utility, will tell you a lot about how your network configuration is set up. In my Windows Vista front end, let's run just ipconfig, and I'll hit enter. And this tells me the DNS suffix I'm using, my local IPv6 address, my IPv4 address. I can see subnet masks and gateways associated with this, and I can see how I'm connected. I have another local area connection that's a tunnel in this particular machine, and I have a tunnel connection right here, number 6 and 7 that I'm not using currently. My current IP configuration is right here. Another nice ipconfig command is to do it with a /all, and that shows me a lot more information. I'm going to scroll back up. Now we can see that I've got a lot going on. This is the Professor PC. I've got a hybrid node type. I've got DNS suffixes, the type of adapter I'm using, MAC addresses, IP addresses, where my default gateway is, my DHCP server, where my DNS servers are. So if you're in the midst of trying to troubleshoot, understand where your default gateway is, understand what DNS server you're using, we're going to go through a lot of that in the 3rd chapter of this particular training for 702. Well, this is exactly where we're going to go to gather those details. If you're trying to determine if a workstation is up or not up on the network, you can use a great little utility called ping to determine if you can get a response back from that station. For example, if we would like to see if the Google DNS service is up and running, I can use the ping command, and I happen to know the Google DNS service is 8.8.8.8, so it makes a very good one to use to see, can I communicate over the network to those DNS servers and back again? And I'll hit enter, and it says it's pinging, and I am getting a reply back from 8.8.8.8. I got 4 replies back. I sent 4, I received 4, I lost 0. There was 0% loss. I know that if I now want to communicate to that device, I know that it is now up and running on the internet, and I can at least communicate all the way to that device and back again. On a Windows-based network, there are some specific Windows commands using the Windows networking capabilities that we need to use. It is all hidden within this net command. I say hidden because there are a lot of different options in here to use the net command. So if you wanted to map a drive to a local device, if you would like to see what drives, what shared drives were available for you to connect to, you would like to print to a specific printer, you can do all of those things using the net command at the command line. To see what net commands are available, you can simply type net and hit enter. If you wanted to get more information on a specific command like net user, we can put a /? at the end, and it shows you the syntax for that. If I type just net user by itself and type it right, there we go, it tells you what the user is that you logged in as and the rights and permissions available and all of the other users on this machine. These are the user accounts that are on my computer, and I can see that that completed successfully. These are the things that normally would be very specific to Windows networking. I can access almost all of them just by using these different options of the net command. The internet is an extremely complex series of networks and routers, and we actually, when we're connecting to a device on the internet, we're not directly connected to it. We're having to hop through many, many different routers to get there and many, many different routers on the way back. We use a command called traceroute to be able to give us an idea of what that looks like. How many hops does it take to get to that location and back again? We can find out all of that by using the traceroute command. Let's try this traceroute and see how many hops it is between my computer and Google. So let's use the traceroute command to www.google.com, and we'll hit enter. What it's going to do is it's already resolved that the name for Google, the IP address for Google is 209.85.225.103. And what it does is 3 checks of response time, round trip response time, and then tries to determine what is the DNS name of what it's connecting to. So you may see some delays as it goes through and it's not able to do a DNS query, or for some reason it's not able to get response times back for that particular subnet. And other times it goes relatively fast. And you can see it hopping through 1 hop, 2, 3, 4, and it goes hop to hop to hop to hop until it finally is going to get down to Google. It's going to do a maximum of 30 hops. If it goes farther than 30, it's going to stop doing the trace route. There are a number of trace route parameters that you can turn on to minimize the delays associated with that. You can tell it not to do DNS lookups for these things. And there's a lot of different options for trace route, but the basic trace route that we've just run without any other type of command line flags really does a nice job at going through and providing us with response time information, and lastly, with the name of the router we happen to be connecting to. Well, it's finally gotten to that IP address for Google, and you can see that it started up here on hop 1, and it hopped through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down to 14. So between me and Google, there are 14 hops to go through and 14 hops to go back. That's quite a long way to go to Google, but that's exactly the path we'll take through all of these different routers and back again just to get to that one host on the internet. Now, as you might imagine, Google is not just one individual IP address. It's not even one individual set of devices. There are devices all over the world. There are servers for Google located in many different locations, and there are even many different IP addresses you can use to get to those devices. We're going to use a program called NSLookup that's going to tell us what the IP address is of a device if all we know is the name. Let's try doing a name lookup here. I'm going to use the NSLookup command, if I spell it correctly, to go to www.google.com and hit enter. It's now going to go out to my default name server, which happens to be Google's name server, and it's going to tell me to get to Google. The actual name of this really is www.l.google.com. I would imagine there's many different servers, probably A through Z and then some. And here are all the different addresses that actually get returned by Google. At any particular time of the day, I might get one of these addresses, and it may be another one on a machine right next to me. That's one way that Google maintains availability, because if people can't get to one server, they'll at least be able to get to another that might be in this list. Let's try another one. I haven't done some of these today, so let's do an NSLookup, and let's do yahoo.com. And let's see what our answer is here. We have a number of addresses for yahoo.com. In fact, there's some other aliases for yahoo.com that I'm connecting to. This is the process that really goes on behind the scenes. When we go to a browser and we type in www.google.com, behind the scenes, your machine has to figure out what IP address do you really want to go to? Because I have no idea what google.com is. Let me look that up. And so what we're really doing is the exact same thing your computer does to resolve an IP address from what originally was a fully qualified domain name. If you're working with a computer and you're not quite certain that the system files on your computer are really the right ones, you feel that perhaps some of the files may be changed, that some of them may be swapped out with another file, one of the things that you can run is a program called SFC that will scan the integrity of all protected system files, and it will make a determination on whether the files that are on your computer really are the system files we started with. And if you have installed some programs that modified any of these, you can run the SFC with a /scan now, and it will now begin to repair those and replace any files so that whenever you now reboot your computer, it's going to now have exactly what it believes to be are the proper system files for your computer. Let's try running this and see what we get. SFC/scan now. And notice that this is another one of those commands that requires that you be an administrator. I'm going to type exit and go right back to our command prompt again. And this time, of course, right mouse click and choose run as administrator. And it's going to ask, are you sure about that? I absolutely am. Now I can do an SFC run or scan now. There we go. Now it's going to begin the system scan. This does take a number of minutes. So if you're looking to do something very quickly, this is not the command for you. It's really going to look through all of your protected system files to make a determination of what's there. And when it finishes, it will let you know if it changed anything and if you should reboot your computer to now use the new system files. Well, that was quite a few command line utilities, but as you can see, there are going to be times when you can make use of almost all of those at one point or another to be able to gather information and troubleshoot things across the network. Let's see what we can remember about this. What utility can derive the IP address of a host based on the name you would give it? And we'd use that command to take www.google.com and got a list of IP addresses back. That was NSLookup. The next question, what command can copy files and directories? The important part of this question is the and directories part, because if you recall, we used the xcopy command to be able to do that. And the last question, which command can show the applications that launch during Windows startup? If you recall, there was one, it was actually a graphical utility that listed out not just all of the files in the startup area, but also all of the services that were running, and that was the msconfig utility. Well, that covers what we needed to know for our 22702 section 2.1. We've done a lot of commands at this particular juncture. We've got msconfig and checkdisk and edit. You can do a lot of things now from the command line based on what you've learned in this module. If you want to be able to look at every single one of our absolutely free A+ videos, you'd like to participate in our message boards and much more, you can visit our website at freeaplus.com.